Nothing bugging you? Come on in. Let's go for a drive. Tim Barnett, and I apologize for stating the reason for the town today. We're going to go for a ride. Should be waiting for me right out here. Somewhere here. He is. Hey Tim, you want to go for a ride? Come on in, man.
Look at this.
This is Roscoe.
Oh my
Roscoe.
goodness,
This is
Roscoe.
Tim Barnett.
Nice to meet you, Roscoe.
Yeah, you got a seatbelt over there. On
Okay,
on
I
the
better
right
put
side.
that on.
Yeah.
Didn't know they made these with seatbelts. Back in the day. There we go. I'm assuming there's no airbags on this thing.
Well, that's. I'm kind of an airbag. I've been told.
Okay, all right. I'll lean into you if there's a problem.
So you can get that.
This is.
All right, bye to your family.
Yeah,
Cool that
see
they're in town.
guys. Wow.
I might bring him back.
Yeah. So, in one piece. What year is this?
Yeah, this is 1970.
Okay.
So
Wow.
it's probably a little older than you.
Yeah, it is. I was born in 1983, so.
So yeah, it's older than you. Well, yeah, this is Roscoe. So
Cool.
question for you today, sir.
Sure.
Maybe I should give you some background. So I grew up when I was in 11th, 12th grade. I started paying attention to the culture that I had grown up in, this Christian bubble.
Yeah.
And one of the main things that got me asking questions and doubting my entire faith is that I realized what I was learning in Sunday school and what I was learning in biology class
They weren't
in high school weren't meshing.
Yep.
So I'm interested because I know you taught science.
I did.
And you were a Christian when you taught science.
That's right.
Okay, but how does this work? I mean, what I learned is I just needed to have faith.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, don't worry about those questions.
Yeah.
Just have faith.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously an opposition between science and faith.
Yeah.
Right? So what do you do with this? How in the world did you teach science?
Okay, so and it's interesting because I was actually doing my physics degree when I started wrestling with these questions. And I thought the same thing. Maybe I just need to grit my teeth and have more faith.
Yeah.
But what I realized was I was starting from a faulty understanding of what faith really is. So if you treat faith as if it's just a blind leap in the dark, then that's not going to be compatible with science. But if you take faith as a trust, active trust based on evidence, I have more faith in my wife today than when I married her, 16 years ago. Well, why? Because she's giving me more reasons, right? More evidence to trust her. If you're starting with that understanding of faith, then it's not going to be incompatible with scientific evidence that's out there, right? But if you're science-minded, you're looking at the evidence. And if you're thinking, well, faith is just a blind leap, then of course, evidence is almost contrary. Give me less evidence so I can have more blind faith.
Right. So faith is not believing in spite of the evidence.
That's right. It's believing in light of the evidence, right? I think that's how Sean McDowell puts it in one of his books. Very clever way to put it.
Yeah.
So you got to start, I think, by a proper understanding of what faith is. And then to ask the question, are science and faith compatible? You need to understand what science is too. And what's really fascinating is that the science was birthed out of a theistic worldview. And actually, I think a Christian worldview. It was a worldview that understood that the creator of the universe is orderly, and so he has made an orderly, rational universe that when we study, it will be the same tomorrow as it was today. That's a really important presupposition when you're doing science. It was considered an act of worship, to study the created order, nature, what God has revealed was an act of worship and was revealing things about that creator. As Romans 1 says, right? There's something that the world is telling us about the creator that we all kind of know. Or in the Psalms, the heavens declare, they're saying something, right, about the glory of God.
Yeah.
So, and so when it came to people like Sir Isaac Newton or Robert Boyle or Louis Pasteur or James Clerk Maxwell, Francis Bacon, all these guys that have units named after them in the science textbook, these guys were believers in God, and many of them were actually Christians who wrote a ton about Christianity. And so it's so funny to me because I, like so many people, was told that science is enemies with faith, right? And how surprising it was to find out that actually modern science was birthed out of a Christian worldview.
That's so neat to hear the origins of science. Do you think that people are hesitant because of so many scientists are naturalists in the sense of the conclusions to which science can go can only be physical, material, natural.
So that's what's getting smuggled in, I think, to the definition of science. So we looked at the definition of faith. We got to get that straight.
Yeah.
And then you got to get the definition of science straight. Now you can spend a whole, course in a master's level, philosophy course on the philosophy of science. What is science? And here's kind of like the two categories I like to put it in. You have your science as in a scientific method, okay? Like, here's what a scientist does when he goes into the lab. He's gonna form a hypothesis, he's gonna have a question, he's gonna go through he's gonna test that hypothesis and come to a conclusion, And that scientific method might look different whether you're a biologist or a chemist or a physicist or whatever. But then, as you just pointed out, some people are using the word science as like a synonym for naturalism. And you can only come to naturalistic conclusions. And if that's your working definition of science, then of course, belief in God and things of the spirit, Christianity, these things are going to be incompatible with that definition because by their very nature, they're outside of the realm of the natural and naturalism. And so I think you're right. I think that if you start from a faulty understanding of faith, that's just a blind leap. And if you start with a faulty understanding of science, that it's just, naturalism, then of course you're going to come to a conclusion that if I want to be a scientist, I need to abandon faith in Christ. I need to abandon belief in God.
So you think it's actually possible to study the natural world and come to some conclusions that are outside of the natural world?
It is. Well, what's interesting is I think you can study the natural world and you're going to come to discover causes that are natural. That's true. But I think what you can do with some of those is insert them into a philosophical argument that could come to a conclusion that is outside the natural. So let me give you an example. One of the kind of the famous arguments for God that William Lane Craig has popularized is called the Kalam cosmological argument. It's just simple form, syllogistic form, goes, everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Now, that's a philosophical argument, but one of the premises has scientific evidence behind it. The universe began to exist. You can use philosophy to talk about that and come to a conclusion on that, but you can also, look at what the astrophysicists have to say about that question. We can look at the Big Bang and some of these other things and see, actually, there's some scientific evidence that backs up this premise that the universe began to exist. To get to a conclusion that the universe must have a cause, but that cause must be outside of time and space and matter and energy. Of course, that's not going to be
all the things that are counted as the universe.
That's right, outside of it.
Outside.
So that's going to be something beyond nature, what we might even call super nature, right? Supernatural. And that's where I think you can get to a cause that looks a whole lot like the God of the Bible. So there we're using evidence that's pointing to the supernatural in a sense. It's not that we're proving God by using science. We understand that science has its limitations, but we can use it kind of, I think, to point to God or the supernatural.
Yeah. This is so good. You have any resources or suggestions to help us think more clearly about science and faith? Where should we go?
I think that a great resource is anything by John Lennox. Now, John Lennox is an Oxford mathematician, PhD. In fact, this guy's got more letters after his name than in his name, so you got to look up John Lennox. He has a book that's really helpful, even for a high school level, it used to be called God's Undertaker. Now I think it's called Cosmic Chemistry. Okay, so that would be a great book for especially high school age. If you want to go a little bit deeper, a guy like Stephen Meyer who's just incredible when it comes to these issues. He's got a book called The God Hypothesis. Now, it's a thick one, okay? It's like 700 pages, but man, he goes into all these things we've been talking about in great detail. And then, of course, Stand to Reason. We have resources, and we actually have an STRU course. It's free. They're short little classes where I'm the teacher, and I think each lesson is about 7 minutes long. There's about 5 or 6 lessons, and I go through some of this material, and that's great for a church group or a family to walk through or whatever.
Okay, str.org.
You got it.
Look for Mr. Tim Barnett. Tim, thanks so much for taking a ride with me and Roscoe. That was great.
Thanks for the ride. This is great.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.